what I really want to talk about now is the economic impact of home building. For some of you who saw in the breakout session, we spoke about that too, but this is an important issue. We don't appreciate how much housing brings to the community. Housing is a tremendously valuable asset. Sure, it's valuable as we build it, but it's valuable after it's built. It brings benefits along the way, and it turns out it pays its way as well. I think that is the critical point. We underestimate the benefits, and we underestimate the net benefits housing brings. So with this in mind, I want to talk a little bit about what these benefits are. I want to also teach you how to think about what the benefits of home building are. How do you quantify something? You have to measure it before you can quantify it. So without further ado, the way we think about housing is a threefold process. There's a construction phase, there's a rental phase, and there's an occupancy phase. In the construction phase, builders and developers build houses. Develop land, build houses. It takes 8 or 9 months for this process to be complete. And there are a tremendous amount of benefits because there's a tremendous amount of money being injected into the economy because of this activity. Now, a lot of people think after the 8 or 9 months is over, the process ends. But no, it continues. There's the occupancy phase. But during this construction phase, there's also, you could think of it as a knock-on ripple phase. Because every 2 weeks, as an employer, you pay your employees. And then the employees begin to spend money. And that spending of money itself creates all kinds of economic stimulus. So here, what happens is the builder pays the people, pays workers, pays suppliers, pays fees to government, and now in the ripple phase, the government now spends that money, and it ripples through the economy 3 or 4 times and causes all kinds of lovely stimulus to the local economy. After 8 or 9 months, this phase ends, and then necessarily this phase ends, but then this phase begins. And this phase brings in benefits to the community year after year, year in and year out. To think of the sizes of these effects, the construction phase, you can think of it as 6 feet tall as I am. The ripple phase is roughly half as big, but goes on simultaneously. So you've got 9 feet of economic stimulus, if you will, during this early construction and ripple simultaneously going on. Followed by the occupancy phase, which goes on forever, and is half as big yet again, but goes on and on and on and on and on, as long as the home is occupied, 60, 70 years, whatever it is. So over time, this phase becomes bigger than those. Those are short, very, very stimulative, followed by a longer phase that's less stimulative. And the key here is that this phase here is when government also has to bring in services to the house. Kids are living in the house, people are living in the house, they need water and sewer and costs. So this is where the costs are incurred. And to see if housing pays its way, we have to look at all the benefits housing brings in the occupancy phase, let alone those 2 phases, and then compare it to the costs. So we look here at home construction in all 4 counties. We looked at a development in each of the 4 counties that was representative of what's going on in the metro area in 2010 when the study was done. You could look at 11, it really wouldn't change the story for any appreciable degree. So we're looking at all the effects, all the homes being built in all 4 counties. And remember, 2010 and 11 were not particularly good years, so the numbers we're going to get are all going to be somewhat depressed in terms of volume. Now here we're also being very, very careful here to make sure we pick up only effects that are the result of home construction and homes being occupied. We're not looking at anything else. The argument we're making is a household comes in, a house is being built, and a household moves in. The question is, what economic demands, what's going to be supplied to that house because that house is being built and occupied that comes from the local community and that we know is coming from the local community. So we're going to throw away things like beer bottling or movie production because if you build more homes or occupy more homes, that is not going to increase the movie industry here in town. As I said earlier, I mentioned earlier in the presentation, if you move to Kohler and build a house in Kohler, Kohler won't make any more water faucets for you. Because Kohler is not making water faucets for the city of Kohler, they're making water faucets for the whole country. There has to be a causal relationship in our model. When you build a house, you will need these services, and these services will be provided locally. If you can say that, then we include it in the analysis. Otherwise, it's excluded. This lowers our multipliers. Otherwise, they'd be a little higher. It wouldn't be 50% as big, it would be 60. And the last effect would be maybe 30% as big, not 25. Because we're depressing the multipliers, because we're excluding all this other activity that may go on with the home construction activity, but is not causally related. It just happens to occur simultaneously. There's correlation, but not causality. Now, history of the model has been around for a long time. We do a lot of analysis for lots of places. If you're interested in how the model works, let me know. We can send you a lot of material on the details, the innards of the analysis. Now, this is the data for the local analysis that we did. We looked at 100 houses, 100 single-fam houses, and 100 multi-fam units. You know, to have a healthy housing market, you really need both types of housing. In different phases in your life, sometimes you want a small house, sometimes you want a big house. You have a couple of kids, and you need more space. And the kids get big and they go to college, you need less space. Then you get divorced, even less space. Then you get remarried. You know, it goes on and on and on. Different phases, you need different types. So a healthy housing market will have enough supply of both types of housing. It turns out here in Milwaukee, you're getting roughly even amounts of both the last couple of years. So these are the prices. This is what the raw lot costs, undeveloped, unplatted, unzoned, on anything. And the point here is that $13,500 of value is there whether the home is being built or not. And therefore we're subtracting it from the price of $280 to get to $266.5 or so, or $267, and that's our starting point. And from that we subtract out all the manufactured components in the house under the rubric that they weren't produced locally, deliberately because that house has been built. Developers and builders pay fees, the governments for permission to build and impact fees, and they pay property taxes, which are on the high side actually, but I'm not going to discuss that too much right now. Let's look at the results. You're going to be surprised, despite the fact that the numbers aren't all that large in terms of production. Again, we're looking at 100 here, so to get last year's actual numbers, just add a 0 to 100 to get 1,000, add a 0 after 200, add a 0 here, and add a 0 there to get 1780, and that's what you get for 1,000 units. These are big numbers. If you look at the income and taxes together, you've got roughly $15 million and roughly 180 jobs. That's phase one. That's this part of the process, the construction phase. But because these people have jobs, and because there's all this money now milling around the economy that wasn't milling around before, people have this money in their pockets, government has this money in the government coffers, and they start to spend it. And that causes the ripple phase. And the ripple phase, remember, is roughly half as big as the construction phase. So if you have 15 million here and 180 jobs here, the jobs fall to about 90, and the income falls to about 7.5 from 15, just about dead on half. This is the ripple phase. And a key thing to keep in mind with the ripple phase is if you add the 94 jobs plus the 178, you're about 270 jobs. Of those 270 jobs, well less than half are actually in construction. So when construction's doing well, of course the home building industry is doing well, and the construction industry is doing well, and the individual builders and their suppliers are doing well, and the lumber yards are doing well, but so are restaurants, and car dealers, and hair salons, and baseball stadiums, and everything else is doing well as well. More than half the benefits that accrue when the housing industry is doing well or poorly are not in home construction. So right now, less than half the benefits are in home construction, then in other places, here and here, and here and here and here. That's the ripple phase, roughly half as big as the construction, lasts 8 to 9 months, and then it's done. And then comes the occupancy phase. We had 200 jobs originally, then 180 jobs, then about 94, now about 50. We had about 15 million in income originally, and then about 7.5, and now we have about 4. Again, just about dead, half again. This benefit goes on forever, because these households now need services that are being provided. They need a piece of a bank, a piece of a school teacher, a piece of a policeman, a piece of a lawyer, both public sector and private sector. If you add these three things together, construction, ripple, and occupancy, over 10 years, for example, look at what you get. These are very large numbers, $60 million. So for 1,000 homes, that means we had roughly $600 million of benefit to the local community over a decade for the homes built in 2010. If you triple these numbers, which is probably more realistic, you're getting close to $2 billion of benefit over a 10-year period. Now, there's multifam here too, which we're not going to do in the interest of time, but the benefits are large here too. If you add up the multifam, it's almost 40 million more. So you look at numbers back here, you have 60 million, and here it's 40 million. You have $100 million a year if you just build 1,000 single family and 1,000 multifamily, 100 of each. It's $100 million bucks. So it's $1 billion. If it's a lot more, if you multiply by 10 to get actual construction last year, it's about $1 billion bucks. To put it into employment perspectives, based on 1,000 single fam and 1,000 multifam, that's the total construction phase employment, not ripple phases. just the construction phase of employment. And again, if we were to double it or triple it, we'd be doubling it here, we'd be tripling it, we'd be up there somewhere in there. So home construction would be very, very large. If you look at a more normal year, we're looking at a very weak year, and it's still, from what I could tell, about 20th or 22nd largest employer in the area. So it's appreciably large, and we should remember that as well. Home building is not just you building 2 or 3 homes, it's us collectively building thousands of homes of different types all across the community. Now, the problem is it costs money to build it costs money to provide services to a house. And this is where the government gets angry and says, not angry, they say, whoa, yeah, it's good to have all that tax revenue and jobs, but you got to remember the other side of the equation, and that's the problem. So what does that cost? Every time a house is built, a single-family house is built, every year local governments must spend $5,500 to provide local services to the house. We've subtracted out intergovernmental transfers, which are sometimes very, very large. So if we didn't subtract these intergovernmental transfers, this number would be roughly double. And that's the actual amount of money that's spent on a per house basis. But this analysis is looking at these 4 counties only, not the whole state. So if the money leaves the area, it dies as far as our model is concerned. If it comes in from out of the area, it also doesn't count as far as we're concerned. It's like, how much money does the county get, and how much must the county spend? That's the question we're looking at. So it's $5,500 per year per house, single fam, and it's $17,000 in capital. This first slide here looks only at teacher salaries, policeman salaries, and fireman salaries. Here we're now looking at building a piece of a school for the piece of a teacher, and building a piece of a hospital for the piece of a public hospital, for a piece of a nurse and a piece of a doctor, and you get the idea. If you don't build infrastructure, class sizes will increase, hospitals will get too full, we won't have enough place for people. We have to build infrastructure to accommodate the increase in population. Now for multifam, the costs are somewhat cheaper. It's not $55.55, it's only $37.34. And in terms of capital, the capital costs weren't $17, they're only $11,250. One-time capital costs for multifam, because multifam households are smaller than single-fam households. This is important to point out. Single-fam households are larger. One of the reasons you buy a single-fam house or a townhouse is because you want more space. You may want to live in the burbs, live downtown, whatever it is. But part of it is because you have a bigger house. So now the question is, does housing pay its way? And the answer is yes, housing pays its way. Of course housing, these are expensive houses. They cost on average, single fam, $280,000. Substantially more than the average existing home or the median existing home. I don't have a lot of time, I'm not going to get into details, but suffice it to say, collect revenues, pay teachers' salaries, with the leftover money, use it to pay down the principal we have to spend to buy the capital, $17,000 per single-fam house, and about $11,000 per multi-fam house, times 1,000 houses each is that much. Take the money, pay the salaries, with the leftover money, pay interest on the bond, pay off the principal, and by the second year, there's no principal left. The bond has been totally repaid in less than 2 years. So the nuts and bolts say housing pays its way. It pays its way in less than 2 years. And after year 1, you have a net revenue benefit per house of $400,000 for these 200 units. On average, $2,000 per unit type. It's a little more for single family, less for multi-family, but that's the basic notion. And this is a subsidy that now goes to the government. They can reduce property taxes of existing homeowners, give you more community services, give you more parks and recs, more trash collection, whatever it is the government wants to spend the money on, you're getting a benefit. You're getting a net benefit from these new homes because they're relatively expensive. And the people who live in these homes juice up the economy relatively, on average, more than the existing homeowners. Now, we can put into perspective, housing pays its way here in less than 2 years. 2 years compared to what? 2 years compared to this. How fast did you pay off your mortgage on your own house? How fast did you pay off your car loan? How fast did you pay off your student loans? If you paid those off in 2 years, you're paying things off as fast as we are here in Milwaukee. If it took you longer, you're not being as productive and as quick as we are here publicly. So this is very, very quick. As I said earlier this morning, if you pay it off in 5 years or 10 years or 15 years, those are pretty good numbers. Here it's 2. That's very, very fast. So I think the fees could be lower. I think you could reduce some costs, reduce some taxes, but that's a conversation for another day. I don't want to pursue that now. I'm saying the fiscal infrastructure that you've got here now allows houses to be paying themselves off quickly and bringing net revenues to governments, and we aren't even picking up all the benefits that are accruing to the community in another column, they'll pick up the property taxes and taxes paid by the corporations where these people have jobs. So they work in a McDonald's, or they work in a law office, or they work in a light industrial manufacturing facility. There's a lot of tax revenue coming from those because property taxes are often higher and the cost of services are lower to a bank or to a CVS or a Walgreens or something. So there's more benefit coming. My point is there's benefit there on the commercial and industrial and light industry and manufacturing and retail side, but there's also net benefit on the residential side. That's important. Now, two last slides and we're done. I want you to remember what I've said. And there's two key points to why housing pays its way. There's no magic. The first reason is houses are much more profitable than just property taxes. The property taxes for each single-family house were $5,000. If we go back 7 or 8 slides, we'll remember that the cost of providing services to that same house was $5,550. So the property taxes alone aren't even enough to cover the services that the local governments have to provide out of their own revenue. So they charge more, so the house brings in more taxes. You pay some local option sales taxes maybe. You pay a cell phone tax, you pay gas tax, you pay electric tax, you pay cable tax. It goes on and on and on and on and on. If you add up all those taxes and the ripple effects embedded in them, the total benefits to the community of a house are about $8,500. Way more than the $5,000, roughly 65% more. Multifamily story is quite similar. Houses are more than property tax machines. Don't underestimate the benefits of homes by focusing just on property taxes. And the last reason housing pays its way is we overestimate the costs. Here we underestimate the benefits, we overestimate the costs. How many kids do you think there are in a house? How many kids do you think are in a house? It's 2. Yeah, you're wrong. It's half a kid. The number of kids per house is roughly 0.4 for multi-fam houses and 0.6 for single-fam houses. That's just the way it is. If we thought if it was really 2, our population would be growing at a rate of doubling every 22 or 23 years. But it's growing much, much less frequently, much slower than that, less than 1%. And to have growth rates of a little bit less than 1%, the number of kids per house are roughly half. So we overestimate the cost, thinking there are 2 kids per house. We underestimate the benefits, thinking houses bring in nothing more than property taxes. And that's why we have this misperception that houses aren't as beneficial as they are.